Hello, hello, people. So karibuni sana for our second edition of Savo Lifestyle Be All Right Week. So, first of all, I'm so happy. I'm so happy to be here. It's such a pleasure to be with Emma again. The first time you were here, just to give a recap, our topic was on what was it? Do you remember? It was on being self-care, like taking care of yourself, and we also talking about burnout. So at that point, I think we figured that it's middle of the year, and there's people who probably would be experiencing a lot of burnout. So we figured, why not? For our residents, for you beautiful people, tuarushe kakitu. So today we are in the company of, she will introduce herself.
My name is Emma. I'm a clinical psychologist. I practice as a therapist, and I'm also I'm in my final semester in USIU in my master's program, and mental health is something very dear to me.
Wow. Okay. And aside from that, we are also joined with Leti. Leti can also introduce herself. She's just online.
Yes, hi everyone. Good evening. I am Leti Kanye, and I am also a clinical psychologist and completing my master's in clinical psychology. And I'm really happy to be here and be with the Savo residents once again.
Karibu sana Leti, and as usual, we are very, very happy to have you. Maybe before we start, I think a lot of people think of your field as a very involving field. Would you guys think of it? Would it be probably there's someone watching and they've been thinking about getting into the field? What would be some advice that you would give them?
I think being a psychologist is quite involving. It's quite some task, but I think it's really fulfilling. Like when you've worked with clients like for over a year, they've been consistent in their therapy sessions, week by week, like to see their growth, but it's quite challenging because you definitely hear the saddest stories. People do not come with stories that like they are doing really well. Yeah, but serving humanity is really a nice thing. Yeah, to see people who are suicidal, know that a point in their life where they have plans to build houses, to own homes, to do family life. Like it's really nice.
That's so nice to hear. What about you, Leti? What do you think? What do you think about the field that you're in? What's some advice that you would give someone who would probably be thinking about getting into the field?
I think the field is fantastic. The human nature is about evolution all the way from back then up until now. And to be in a profession that helps you get there faster with the support, with the resources, with awareness, with insight, all these things that we use, it's really, really rewarding to help people move from one stage to the other, overcome things, and just move in life in a very healthy way.
Oh, that's really, really nice. Funny enough, at some point, that's a field that I really thought about getting into, but tuongeo nyuma ya tent. So while we're here, kama uko na sisi, fire emojis pale kwa comments, tunawaona. Ryan, thank you sana. Drop that fire emoji when you land. Tukisonga. So now that we all know who we are talking to, we would probably love to start off. I think as communicated earlier, the theme of our Be All Right Week is on trauma and dealing with trauma. The reason we chose this is because we figured this is a topic that not so many people talk about, and probably a lot are probably going through it. So we figured, I think as we work to assist our residents, as we work to make sure our residents are in the best environment to be, belong, become, why not do this topic? So Emma, take us through.
Okay, yes, trauma is a topic of discussion, and especially people who come for therapy, most of them have trauma history. So it's something like to create awareness, I'm sure like it will be something really good. And also like when we look in the field of mental health, sometimes there's the people going to see a therapist, sometimes they look at it like it's a luxury, but mental health basically I would say it's a basic human need, I would say so. Setting aside like your 50,000, you're like, this one I'm gonna go see a therapist is very important, you know, the same way we do for school fees, the same way we do to buy homes, all those things, because as you do life and then you make your choices based on trauma, like let's say you grew up like in a home where there was a lot of abuse, and then you attract partners who are of the same nature, and then they end up like dumping you or you dumping them, and then in the court cases, divorce, all that, and maybe we spent just a little money, you spent like 60,000 and went to understand how you behave the way you behave, it would really make a lot of difference. Yeah, because trauma really like influences how we think, you know. Yeah, and we are going to see the various ways as we discuss in our romantic relationships, in our friendships, like basically our whole life, in our work life. Like if you've ever been in a toxic job, maybe you think like even your next employer will be like your other one, you know. Trauma distorts how you think, you know, like you may date somebody and then they do to you bad things, and then when you meet new people you're like, women will always lie to you, you know, and it is that one woman who lied to you or that one man who lied to you. So yes.
Okay. That's interesting. I'm seeing more people are joining in. Asanteni sana. And maybe Leti, what would you define trauma as?
Yeah, just as to add on to what Emma has said, it is simply put an event that happens that caused significant distress, and now it affects experiences in your life. Because that emotional response that you got to the event is so significant that anything that triggers it automatically gives you the cues of what the event was. And so now you think like these other events are the thing that happened to you. So it significantly changes how you view life or how you view other things, even though they may be unrelated or related to something that happened. Yeah.
Okay, that's nice. And what about you, Emma? What would be your definition of trauma?
I would also add to what Leti said. It's basically an event that distorts how you think, how you look at life, unless you're able to see, like, this is how it affected me, this is how this event affected me, and challenge your thinking, not to make decisions because of the traumatic event, like to make it like a little bit simpler. Let's like use like a man example, like a man maybe who was dumped because he didn't have money. You may find he will work very hard. Some of the trauma-based choices may be good, but you know, you find maybe they're like really hardworking, so that they're never done for the same thing, you know. And the person, you see that one, the trauma has made them really hardworking, but also on the other end they may be looking at women like they're very materialistic, and it's that one person, you know. But being able to get to the point of, it was this one person, this is how the event changed me. Not all people are materialistic. It's okay to be broke. It's okay to go through seasons of life, you know. Yeah.
Umesikia wa baba, it is okay to be broke. It is okay to be broke. But don't work towards getting broke kindly. But also don't finish yourself because of that. Yes, don't put too much pressure on yourself. And if you feel like that, Emma is here. Leti is here. Yes.
We'll definitely work with them the journey.
And I'm trying to think. There's different sort of levels of trauma. There's different types of trauma. How would they be defined? How would you how would you sort of categorize these different kinds of trauma that people might be going through?
Leti?
Maybe Leti, you can take us to that.
Actually, there are three types of trauma. Yes. So there are three types of trauma. So we have the acute, we have the chronic, and we have the complex. So acute trauma, that is one event. Just one event happened and it caused significant distress to you. So it could be a once in a lifetime thing. Like, for example, if you've experienced a road accident, it was the first time, you may never experience one again. But just that one event causes so much distress to you. Okay? So then we also have chronic trauma. So that refers to situations where there's an event, it is prolonged or extended. So a good example of that is when you're in a situation of domestic violence or child abuse, where every day you experience different aspects of abuse from the same person, but because it's from an extended period of time, it affects you for that extended period of time and causes significant effects on you. Okay? And then now for the third one, we have complex trauma. Now, complex trauma refers to having multiple events, and they could be different. They could be happening at the same time, or they could be successive. So they could even be unrelated. So maybe you experience child abuse, and then at some point in your adulthood, you experienced a car accident, and then maybe at some point later, you experienced a natural disaster. So they're very different events that happen, but they were all so significant in your life, and now they affect you to a point where your experiences are heavily dependent on those events that took place. And the emotional toll that it takes on you is a lot, because with trauma, it's very interesting because you can have that single event that happened. You could have the accident, you could have abuse, but that doesn't mean that you will automatically develop PTSD. That's the interesting thing. Some people don't end up having PTSD and some people do. So trauma is also very varied in that not everybody can have the same outcome, even though they may have had a similar experience. Yeah, so that's a bit on the types of trauma that we have.
And on PTSD, what, as you said, like not everyone would probably experience it. So what would be, is it the extent, or is it just the nature of the person, or what leads to someone having to experience or experiencing PTSD after a traumatic experience?
So one of the very leading research on PTSD shows that early childhood experiences has a very big impact on whether or not you develop PTSD even as an adult. So early childhood experiences help you learn how to calm yourself when things are distressing or when you experience something shocking or something very significant to you. So if you learn that in childhood, a lot of the times you pick that behavior up even when you're through adolescence and into adulthood. So you may not be experiencing the same events, but you know how to get that internal peace. But when you find someone who was consistently in a distressing environment and never learned how to calm down, they carry that forward. So even in times when they have a traumatic experience, they're not able to, so that grows to a point where the emotions are sort of suspended in the air and they're consistently affecting how you live life, and you're not experiencing internal peace. So you're still at a state where these emotions are sort of loose in your mind and they can easily be triggered at any point. So they've not really been processed, or you've not learned how to work through them.
Okay. That's quite interesting.
Also, to add on to what Leti said, if you have like protective factors like a supportive family, maybe like you have some savings and you're facing a crisis, it can act as a buffer to preventing developing PTSD. also resilience, like the individual differences between people. Some people are very resilient. They can go through hard situations and still like cope with life, and it's not the same for every person.
Okay, and what would probably be, or rather at what point is or does an experience probably lead to trauma? For example, if I experience something, at what point does it do? Is it a sort of standard, rather? Like at this point, I can be able to probably recognize that I am experiencing trauma from an event.
There are symptoms. There are symptoms that psychologists and psychiatrists they check to determine whether you have developed a disorder. The disorders are post-traumatic stress disorder or acute stress disorder. The two of them, it's not a must that you meet the criteria for the disorder, but if you've experienced a life-threatening situation, that is one way, like you've experienced trauma, or it has happened to you, or you've observed somebody else it happening to them. Also, something else we can say is also something else when we talk of trauma, it can be even in love relationships, in just different those things that change your reality of how you viewed life. Yes, Letty can add something.
Yeah, so also timelines really matter, because when something like an accident happens, it's very normal to be afraid, to be in shock, to be in some emotional distress where you're scared of certain things that remind you of it. So there's normally a period of time in which we consider where it's normal to experience different emotions as a result of an event that was significant to your life. But now what we work with also is timelines by which after this point, and you're still experiencing symptoms like the accident happened yesterday, now those are some of the things that we look out for that we consider to be a problem now. Because if an accident happened today and you're still feeling scared, or you're still jerking, you're still having a startled response, it makes sense. But if you're having the same thing a year down, 6 months down, and what we look at is the level of distress or how you're experiencing the fears, it seems like it just happened right now. Like your responses are just come from an accident right now. So it's not that the symptoms have reduced. So when they're in that level of intensity as though it just recently happened, those are some of the things that we look out for, because the timelines do not match the time when the event took place.
Okay, I think that's quite interesting. That's one thing that I'm as I keep on learning from these two beautiful people, the things that I'm really getting to know. And as you said, there's very many different things that could probably cause trauma. What I think we mentioned some of them. Maybe you could take us through again the different causes of trauma.
I can begin. Letty has talked on the different types of trauma. On the causes of trauma, there can be the first one, assault, verbal or sexual. When somebody has lived in a verbal abuse is like when you're told demeaning words, like you're useless, you're stupid, even emotional abuse, gaslighting, somebody who makes you doubt your reality. Like if you grow up in such a setup, most likely you'll keep on doubting yourself. You never believe this is your reality. Like you have to keep confirming, is this the way? And for verbal abuse, those demeaning words. So if you're told you're useless over a long time, you may not even try out things because you think you're useless. And now with the trauma, you can actually not tend to be attracted to people who are familiar to what was abuse for you. Maybe people who are verbally abusive, emotionally abusive. You're not able to tell this is how a healthy person should function. Also, there's sexual abuse, and somebody has been raped. It has a negative effect on them and affects how they view their sexuality, and sometimes how they view their sexuality like for some people, you'll find like somebody who's been raped, you find like they maybe sometimes like feel like when you wear certain type of clothes, this is going to happen to you, but it's because of that one incident that happened to them, and it changes somebody's reality. Like sometimes some people who've been abused, an example, you find they develop unconscious ways to cope, like somebody may begin eating too much and then you become obese because you think like if you're not a big person, you're going to be able to, you'll not be a target. So it affects how you think until now your patterns are checked by a profession. Why are you doing whatever you're doing? Because even with the eating, the obesity, or not even eating, there are all psychological disorders. And then when you also talk of other types of trauma like neglect, even that leads to what are they called? Those homes where people go to, what are they called?
Rescue centers?
Yes, rescue centers, because their needs were not taken care of, which is food, shelter, just a basic family need. Neglect can even be emotional. You may be in a place where your emotions were not heard. You're not asked how are you feeling. Like if you're fed, you're given the money, like people think you're supposed to be okay, but a person is made up of the emotional. You need to keep checking like how are you doing today, and giving even a child or even the adult you live with like space for them to express how they feel without telling them no, you shouldn't feel like this. Actually, anytime you find yourself telling somebody you should not feel like this, invalidating how they feel. So we should feel everything, jealousy, love, everything in all equal measure. They all make us human. And then the third one is witnessing a traumatic event like a car accident. Like it can, as Letty was explaining, like it affects how you think. You may be like, I'm not going to use matatus again, or I'm not going to drive again. It affects how you view life basically. Also people who work in the army, you see like there's a lot of, it's scary basically. It's scary working in the army, the shootings and all that. A lot of, depending on the career that you work in, it can have an impact on, it can make you like, to have the trauma. Even being a psychologist, actually, there's something called vicarious trauma. When you hear so many stories, like I remember there's a time like when I was leaving the house, I'd be like, my dress is too short, but it's because I have had people telling me so many times, I was in a short dress, I was raped. So like now when I'm leaving the house, I'm like, and isn't this too short because of what I have had? And that's why even like for professions, doctors, nurses, police officers, psychologists, everyone basically, but even those specific professions, it's important to seek the help of psychologists and mental health professions to process how you're feeling. So even a therapist is another psychologist to process all that.
Okay. That's quite interesting. I never thought about it like as from the aspect of being a psychologist, having to hear it so much until it probably gets to you. It's quite interesting.
The work is depressing, by the way, clearly. Being a therapist.
I don't know if there's more causes from Letty. Anything that you can add on to that?
Yes, so for causes, we primarily look at events, but also some people's lived experiences can predispose them to trauma because maybe they've had it around the family, like early childhood experiences, or if you grew up in a household that you experienced abuse or domestic violence. These are some of the things that can predispose you to experiencing trauma or being diagnosed with the PTSD and acute stress. But a lot of the time we talk about the events because sometimes even without predisposition, the significance of the event can lead you to trauma. And I think this is also a good point to say that even as we're talking about relationships, I know there's been a trend where most people or most men who broke up with women are being called narcissists, and it's resulting in trauma, but it's not necessarily the case. But relationships can lead to traumatic experiences because of the prolonged nature of interaction and the adverseness depending on who it is you're interacting with. and also childhood experiences, as we've talked about before, and near-death experiences, because most people think about life and rarely think about it. Always seems over there, an event that makes it seem like it's closer than it actually is. It's very scary, and it can really bring a lot of existential concerns and worries about life, because for most of us, death is a taboo. So you want it very, very far away from you, even though it's a reality. But those are some of the causes of trauma.
Okay, that's interesting. And I think as we move to the next segment on symptoms of trauma, I'd love to use. I was speaking to Emma right before our webinar, and I was explaining something that I went through. Well, I really didn't know that it was. She said that it was trauma. I still didn't really think it is, but
that is traumatic.
I'd rather not say what it is, what the experience was. But
then you actually observed somebody getting close to dying, so it's trauma.
So sorry. At that point, I didn't understand how I was feeling. So for you as a clinical psychologist, what would probably be my actions or my behavior? What would you use to probably tell that, yep, he's probably going through a bit of trauma?
So to tell whether you are going through trauma, we said not everybody who experiences the situation is going to develop trauma, the disorders, especially maybe like you found somebody to debrief, and that's a psychological debriefing. Like when somebody has had an accident or something traumatic has happened to them, it's important to, like, you don't go asking what happened. No, the things that happen first, you're supposed to ask, do you have food, like the basics, until the person calms down and they're now ready to talk. But it's not like what happened, and could be your coping skills, or the people are very supportive and they had you, but we are going to read through some of them, and then Letty is going to check through some of them, and then you'll tell us whether you had trauma. But like for the acute stress, if you have the symptoms as Letty had explained, the time frame should be 3 days to 1 month if the symptoms are there, and for PTSD you diagnose it like 6 months in that period if you've been experiencing the symptoms. So part of the symptoms that we're going to explain, and then Letty will do the others, is first mood swings. There's a lot of irritability, the mood moving from very sad to very happy, and then the irritability and anger, which are all symptoms of a depressive sort of, like a depressive episode or something, which are also symptoms of PTSD, of the trauma. There's self-blame and shame, where you feel like in the cases of like rape, you're like, how about if I didn't live in the house at that time, maybe I couldn't get raped. And then shame, you're scared to tell people what happened to you because they're gonna judge you. And as you said, we shouldn't invalidate people, as when somebody tells you I was raped, you should not be the first one to say it's because of your dress, or it's because of your trouser, or it's because of the situations you put yourself in. You should tell them, I hear you, it's a hard situation to be at, and then there is also physical pain, like headaches. Sometimes people have like somatic symptoms like headaches, pains in the body, if like even like for sexual abuse. There's the pain and all that, and then there is the depression and hopelessness. Depression is basically being in a very low mood, and helplessness is, you feel like you didn't have control over the situation, and then there is dissociations. When you talk of dissociation, is whereby like you forgot, like you stored that information of whatever happened when you even go for therapy, like what happened between 3 years to 10, you have no idea what happened because your brain shut, because the events were very traumatizing, but they still influence how you behave in your day to day, and that's why our profession is very, very, very important, because in the grad school there are techniques that you use for to get the client to heal from the trauma. Letty, you can, as as Jeff is thinking of the ones that he had.
I can continue. Yes. So just even to further elaborate on why we're talking about these symptoms is because when these events happen, they trigger the fight, flight, fright response. Yeah. So what happens is physiologically your body is preparing to fight or run or freeze because a threat has directly affected you. Even when it's emotional, it might not necessarily be a physical event. And so apart from that, there's also the increased emotional response. So that's why Emma is talking about dissociating. You know, system has overloaded, so it just shuts down and you stop feeling everything. So you feel numb, you forget everything because there's a system overload taking place currently. Also, you can have increased heart rate because, as I said, now adrenaline has shot up, and assuming we are ready to fight, there's a threat, and we are preparing ourselves, you know. So these are just some of the things. And also other things include nightmares, because now the information is stored in your brain as an experience. And because it's not dealt with, it keeps coming back in flashbacks and nightmares. So it's like you're re-experiencing it in other ways because it's not been processed. So those are some of the things that we look at. And also startle responses. You know, if, for example, let me use the example of an accident. If, for example, some of the sounds that you had were a loud bang, you know, so now even someone bangs a table, it takes you back there and you respond with fight, flight, fright, because the information hasn't been processed yet. Yeah.
Okay, I think fun enough. I'm trying to think about my experience and the fight or flight. I think at some point I used to hear a bang, and I think for a while I was really scared. So should I? Yeah, I'd say it was a bit traumatic, to be very honest. For the first month. And as I hear, probably I feel like I can relate to some of the things that are going. Probably the flashbacks, the fight or flight. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
And the difficulty in sleeping, concentration may also be a problem.
Okay.
Denial and guilt. You may be feeling like you're not living like in your reality, you know, like maybe for the simple example of somebody who's dumped you may be thinking they're gonna come back. And it's why it's important to seek help so that we process the information till we get to accepting this is how things are at the moment.
Okay. I can see that Emma is really talking about relationships. I'm hoping she's not having an experience.
Nairobi.
And even if you are, it's totally okay. It's totally okay.
Yeah, but you see, Jeff, the situations when people come for therapy, they come with relational issues that are all stemming from trauma. Okay, it's a common issue amongst many other things.
I think as we're here, we can look at the comment section. Tunaona Kevin Agai joined in. Bilha Santeni Sana. Nduta says, love the conversation. There's Joy Nduta Wawero, 100%. Victor Murimi, Angela, thank you. Karibuni. Tuendelee kuweka hapo moto kwa comment section hapo chini. Kwa hapo I wish iko hapo. Tuweke moto, tuendelee kuweka moto. And I think as we move on, we'd also love if you guys could ask your questions as you're here. Feel free to ask any questions. We'll be able to answer them through the session tukisonganga. And something I'd really love to know, and I think our people out there would also really love to know, probably myself as well, through the experience that I've spoken about, how do you deal with this thing? How do you deal with trauma? How do you deal with a traumatic experience? What steps can you take as a person to be able to get help?
We would say it's case by case. It's case by case. Like for you, let's say you had the one symptom, so you are not meeting the criteria for the disorder. So like now if you are my client, you would process how did you feel, how are you at, how do you feel about maybe being in the place where the event occurred, we would process. So now when you see a mental health profession, they're able to plan and see this is where this person is at and this is the help they need. So when we talk of the treatment, it's therapy and also through the use of medication. And the use of medication, like for things like insomnia, the insomnia, the client will go to the psychiatrist to have the medication as they go through therapy, so it's able to hold them to wait till the next session. So it's not anything to be taken in lightly. And PTSD, the treatment is long term. It can be a year. It is over a long time. It's not 2 sessions, but maybe like for you had not developed all the symptoms, maybe 3 sessions would be like, okay, you process, and when you're okay, you'll definitely let your therapist know how you're feeling.
Okay. Letty, maybe you can add on to that as well.
Yes, so one of the things that is also highly recommended is what we call calming and grounding techniques, because remember, you're at fight, flight, fright, right? So we want the body to resolve or come back to a state of rest, and so that's why we call for calming and grounding techniques, so that even as you're processing, you don't want everything to come flooding you at once, because that's what brought you to a traumatic state in the first place. So we want to learn and teach how to calm down, calming techniques, so that even your learning is better, even your processing is better. You're able to take it step by step and process what happened to you in a state of calm, so that you're not also trying to run away in the therapy room because you remember this one happened and now you're back to experiencing the same thing again, right? So one of the things we do is calming and grounding as you process it. And then also the talking is very, very important, because talking is part of the processing process, if I can call it like that. Sometimes you just remember bits and pieces of the event, but when you talk, you remember things about what you could smell, what you could hear, what you could see, what you could taste. And that helps you return to a state where you're in touch with reality, and you can still have that memory intact without it being severely destructive in your day-to-day life. So that's why we encourage talking about it, because that helps you to process the information bit by bit without overloading the system. But now you see, when you come to therapy, as trained people, we know how to draw out the information without startling you, and know what to say, when to say it. Because when you're talking to it with a friend, sometimes curiosity gets in the way and you're just trying to think, and then what happened? What? But in therapy, as you're processing, we're able to gauge how distressing is this event for you and what can you handle, So you take it slowly and slowly and slowly until you reach a point where you realize you've covered the whole mile, but you didn't have to experience the distress to the level that it was initially.
And to add on to what Letty said, when we tell people about our experiences, like somebody who is not trained, we judge things from our perspective. Like Jeff, if your friend told you they were dumped, what would you tell them?
Well, it depends. It depends on it. But I'd as a person, personally, I'd probably be there for them, because I know that they're not just telling me for fun. They're telling me because it means something to them. So I wouldn't take it lightly. Of course, I really don't love a dull room. So I'd want to brighten it up a bit, but I'd always want to take it in a way that would be positive to them as well.
Yes, you're a good friend, I see, to your friends. Yes, providing a safe space is definitely important. And now, when we talk about, like, you know, when people see our profession, sometimes we judge situations based on our experiences. So if you've ever been dumped, you'll be like, this one is not even like a major thing. You know what I went through? But now when you go to a trained person, I'll validate your experiences because they're unique to yourself and the same as Letty. You know, be like, yeah, we hear you, we've heard you, and it's okay to, you know, to be going through whatever you're going through. We won't be like, no, it should even have been worse. No, your experiences are very valid. And also therapy is directed talk with the use of techniques, and basically school is 6 years after 4 years of undergrad, you know, and all that. Like, it's a lot intense. It's just like not talking. That's why it's important to see a profession.
Okay. Wow, that's nice to hear. At least as mmesikia mkiwa na marafiki wenu wamewachwa, msiwachekele, msiongeleshe vibaya, don't invalidate them, and just be sure that they're coming to you because they're hoping to get a safe space. So be that friend, provide that space for them. Yes.
I'll pay for their therapy.
Alternatively, mbaya lipia therapy session yake.
Hata inafaa kwa the first option, right?
Yes. I think, to be very honest, I think that would be a really, really nice option.
Because you could also be going through a difficult situation and you don't have capacity to, you know, to have the same for another person. But you see, when people go to a trained person, I'll not tell you my issues, even though I have a lot going on. But now if your friend comes to you, maybe work is stressful, you have your 10 things, and like, no, even me, I'm still suffering. So now in therapy, it's just you alone giving your story. Okay.
So therapy is very it is advised. We will share towards the end on how to reach them. Tutaongelesha. I think as we almost conclude, we'd really love to know. I think amongst the youth and amongst a lot of people who are probably in the age group of late teens and up to the 20s, I think there's a history, from my understanding, of negative ways to deal with trauma, negative ways to deal with issues. Maybe I'd love if you guys would touch on that as well.
Sometimes people may use drugs. You see, drugs, it's basically chasing the dopamine, the feel-good hormones. You're just in your own zone, you know. So sometimes, to not experience those painful emotions as it should be, you may start using drugs. You may start like experimenting kidogo, and then over time, you using a drug, actually you may start. Lakini getting addicted, you don't have a choice whether you get addicted or not. There's something called X factor in the genetics. So if you have it, you're predisposed to having an addiction. So we may be smoking with you, but for me, it will end up to an addiction. For you, it won't, you know. So, and we don't know these things. We don't know these things like we don't know like how our bodies are gonna respond to it. And then now with the drug use, maybe you began using kidogo for social use, you felt good. So now with the negative emotions, like the example of dumping, which is common in that age group, you're like always high to avoid feeling the pain. And if a relationship has ended, whatever should happen is feeling the pain, you know, the loss. You had expected and hoped things are gonna work out. You thought things are a particular way, but the reality right now, it's not what you expected.
Okay. I think one thing I've gotten from that is addiction can be genetic to the X factor. That's quite interesting. It's quite interesting. Letty, probably on from your experience, probably what would be negative ways to deal? Probably it seems something that you've seen people going through. People are having to indulge in the negative ways that they've been able to think that would assist them in dealing with trauma.
Yes, in addition to substances, we have also other addictions. We have eating, we have pornography, we have a number of things that just help to distract, because a lot of the times these thoughts that we have when we're experiencing trauma are so intrusive. They come at times when you don't expect them and when it's not appropriate. You know, you could be sitting in class trying to listen to your biology teacher, and then suddenly you're thrown off and you start remembering things that you'd rather not be thinking about at that time. And so a lot of the times, most people's way to do things is to distract or to get something that helps you feel good instantly. And so a lot of the things like eating, a lot of the things like even exercise, they may not be negative, but the reason why we're placing them at negative ways of dealing with them is because they're not helping you process what's happening, so that in future you stop the intrusive thoughts, the nightmares, the fight, flight, fright. So that's why we're putting them at negative, because we're not dealing with the root cause in the moment. And now you see, when you're at adolescence, late adolescence into early adulthood, those are particularly very stressful times in life because they're transition stages. And so even your body is in a change state. So sometimes you may experience this thing as louder than they are, because remember, you're having mood swings. And now on top of mood swings, you're adding this distress of maybe you've been broken up with or child abuse or whatever. So unaongeza volume to this experience, and it feels bigger than it actually is. And so that's why most people want to just calm it down or stop it now. You don't want to go through processes, you just want now. I want it to stop. And that's why most people go for things that are sort of instant gratification, for lack of a better word in this case, because of the significant level of distress that you are in. Yes.
And later, to add on to what you've said, we can talk of also repression, where like we don't want to talk about things. Like when you're asked about an event or something, you're like, no, I don't want to talk about it. But those things are still affecting you, to date. Also denial of emotions. You don't want to accept how you feel, like with rejection. Okay, Jeff, have you been rejected? I know it's a common reaction to different things.
Well, Shonana, you mattered. You mattered.
It can happen in many things. Maybe a job you applied, a friendship you thought. It's not necessarily it was a love relationship, But yes, the rejection and other negative, they're not negative, other emotions that come and you don't want to feel them. So you may find somebody is numbing and you're like, no, I don't want to feel this, and now you use all the coping mechanisms that we've talked about. And I think these things also are the reason why people are also emotionally unavailable. When people date, you find like, this person, they're not even in touch with their own emotions, so they can't even provide that for you. And in a relationship, definitely those are important things. Like you want people who are emotionally available, but if they have things or they learned how to numb the emotions, they don't even know how to express how they are feeling. Yeah.
Okay, it's interesting. Maybe on as we move, I think we've gotten a question from one by the username The Review. He asks, or she asks, first of all, great conversation, thank you so much. The conversation is for us young people, but how do we tell if our parents are traumatized, and how can we help? Leti, maybe you can take us through that one.
Oh, that has been a very big question of late. One of the things that can help you tell that your parents are or have experienced trauma, I think one of the biggest things is avoidance. When you touch a particular topic and your parent just dodges that one very quickly and doesn't want to talk about it. Because I remember the example of the household they told, when daddy or mommy is feeling like this, don't talk to them, stay away from them. Or don't ask dad about this, don't ask mom about this. And it relates to particular situations, because the parent, maybe when that is asked or said, it triggers some serious rage or some serious range of emotions that is difficult for the family to work with. So that's one of the ways that you can tell. One of them is avoidance. If certain topics or certain things are heavily avoided by parents. Another one is when if your parents experiences like passive reactions to emotions, like for example, if you upset your parent and you have to walk on eggshells and the matter will never be talked about, so everybody is just walking on eggshells because mom is upset, because dad is upset. Everybody is just so scared the slightest thing will tip them off the edge. Those are some of the things that we're looking for, and it's particularly difficult for children because a lot of the time it's expected that the parent will be there for the child. But now we're reaching a place where with the more information and more knowledge that we are having, we have to also educate our parents because they only did what they could with what they knew. And so now that we are having more people being accessible to this information, those are some of the things that, maybe I should clarify. Do not go telling your parents, you're traumatized, I will talk about this thing. That's not what I mean. What I mean is you can approach your parent and just, be human about it and just be like, Dad, I believe you're upset. Okay, Mom, I believe you're upset. But maybe you can talk about it, or we can give you some space, and then after, maybe we can talk about it. Because sometimes giving that information is very helpful and reminds you that your parents are just as human as you. Alternatively, you could also propose for other family members to come in. Because of our cultural differences, maybe a parent won't receive it very well coming from a child. And so maybe you can use other resources like aunties, uncles, family friends who are closer to your parents and have a better ear towards your parents. Yeah, so those are some of the ways that you can deal with it, because it was interesting. I was looking at some information and realized actually our parents' generations went through quite a bit. Went through famine, El Nino, election violence. They had quite a bit of things going on, and depending on what age we are talking about, fight for independence, there's been a lot. There's been a lot that they've gone through, and education for some of the past generation to have education. So there's a lot that went through in their time. But as we've been evolving, as we've been growing, as technology is advancing, we now have more information that we can share with our parents and not use against our parents.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Leti. I'm hoping that answers the question. I think he adds and he says, could you also mention about coping with losing loved ones, especially by death? Maybe can you take us through?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Losing a loved one, is such a sad thing. I don't know. The emotions are overwhelming, and for each person to go through the grief, there are stages. The last stage is acceptance. There's denial. There is grief. There's bargaining, asking God, why this one? Why this time? The depression is when you get into that season of getting into a very, very, very low mood, helplessness. And then actually somebody who's lost somebody, that's how you're supposed to feel. You're supposed to feel the intensity of all those emotions, and we can't tell after 1 year grief will be done. You can't know somebody for 30 years and then you're hoping 3 months you're going to be done with it. And that's why it's important to feel how you're feeling, to go through therapy, to go talk about the person, to process any unfinished business, so that you're able to process it and move forward and make meaning out of life. And when grief happens and when grief has happened and loss has happened, how you're making effort is when you begin getting the person died, they're the painful emotions, you begin creating a life, another life pole. Let's say you go hang out with your best friend on Sunday, maybe over time utafika and then you get other people you're hanging out with, you're going out with, but the immediate reaction and the reaction that is expected is for you to feel very, very bad and all emotions, to cry, to bargain, and we can't tell 1 month is enough, 2 months is enough. But when you do not allow yourself to go through the process, and you will be diagnosed with complicated grief in therapy that can even happen how long, how do I say this, it can happen like an example, to just get a little bit personal being human. I remember seeing the therapist in campus, and I thought the issue that had triggered me was just that issue, and then I go to therapy and I realized my parents had died quite early. I had never grieved and gotten to this point of, this happened. So I went a whole 4 hours, and that time I was 24. So when you do not process emotions as they come and at the right time, it ends up affecting your present. So that's why it's important that people even going through loss and grief to give themselves the grace to go through the emotions. Yes, and even loss can even be of a loved one, of a job, of even potential hope of things. It can be different things. It can even be maybe people even who are going through IVF, or people even who've had stillbirths. Like loss is wide, like even loss of friendships. You thought we are gonna do life together till death, and then you're like, no, I have other plans. And it's good to go through the processes so that we are healthy humans to other people.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I think I'm hoping that that does answer the question, and thank you for that in-depth answer. As we conclude, maybe we can go through some of the effects. So some of the effects of having a traumatic experience. What could be the effects that they could give to a person?
I can go first. A distorted, like for sexual abuse, there can be a distorted view on sexuality. Like you may find maybe somebody who was raped and they get married, the couple has issues with their sexuality. I don't know, being a therapist, you talk everything under the sun, I know. There's nothing new under the sun, clearly. So you may find those are issues that are presenting. Also how somebody views themselves, also sometimes there are very many debates, there are very many ideas on the like being of another, maybe you're being female and you want to be male. Sometimes it may be rooted in abuse at times, but there are very many different reasons, and it's okay to embrace your sexual orientation. But at times, for some people, not every person, it's very diverse. There are those differences, Another view on sexuality, as we had said, like somebody who was raped and you are tiny, then you may be eating a lot so that you're so big so that you're never taken advantage of at another time. And the distorted views in very many things, even apart from sexuality, like even as you are giving examples for relationships, you may be thinking women want to exploit people in this way, men exploit people in this way. But now you learn it is that person who interacted with that was like that. It's not everybody who's of the same kind. And then there's a second one, you may get attracted to familiar toxic relationships. Like we tend to be attracted to what is familiar to us. So if a healthy relationship was not modeled to, like just using it as an example, you may find yourself like you're attracted to people who are like the people you lived with. If your parents were physically abusive, they would fight. And people who are brought up sometimes in homes that have violence, you find in their adulthood they've developed anxiety. And that's why we are saying therapy ni muhimu, like going to pay your monies to become the same way we do for financial freedom, for so many other things. Like it is underrated. It's so helpful so that you understand why do I attract particular sort of people, And even on sexuality, somebody also who has been raped, like using an example, using an example of a woman who has been sexually abused, sometimes you find, or even a man, but the example I have is for females, like you find they have very many sexual encounters, even with people who even beat them physically. I understand everybody has their own value system, I understand, but when power has been taken away from you when you are raped, you think if you give yourself to the people, they will not take away from you by force like it happened before. So to remain in control, when people are coming to you, you're like, maybe you don't like them, but you're like, maybe atafika hapa ni tufikishane hapo, but you don't know, it's so unconscious. And that's why the help of a profession is very important. Yeah, so there's the overeating in instances of sexual abuse, and then there's also self-esteem, where you feel like, why me? Why did I have to go through all that? You think maybe I was a target because I'm too slim, I don't look good, I don't, all those distorted views because of the traumatic event that has happened to you.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Letty, you can add something to that.
Yes, so I would say trauma leads to learning because it changes your experiences completely. The learning could be negative or the learning could be positive. In the negative, you could either add things that compound to what is already happening and make you more traumatized or lead to compounding effects that are not good. Or you could subtract things that were initially there and it's still leading you away from health or a prosperous life. So trauma either makes you learn something good or something bad. On the good side, you can learn more about make you and add things in you that you are probably not aware of before. So now that you have, for example, if you notice the example of the banging table, you realize you have a startled response, it means you now become more alert to your surroundings because you've had an event that forced you to get to that point. And so now you're less likely to be in vulnerable situations that return the same event. So it could lead to something positive. Or you may now avoid things that are triggers and you know can lead you to a state of distress. And so you manage staying away from those things and so promoting more of healthier environments that work best for you. So with trauma, you can have the negative and the positive effects depending on how well you deal with it. So when you have these traumatic experiences and you feel everything that you're feeling, it's neither good nor bad. It just depends on how these experiences now change your life and how you're living as a result of those events.
Thank you so much for that. I think that was a very extensive answer. And I think as we conclude, we can take one more question. Not one more, feel free to ask questions, but one more question from the review, or another question from the review asks, depression can be quite devastating if not addressed. What are the extremes and what can be done to reverse?
Depression can be, yes, it is quite devastating to be in a very, very low mood. I think case by case, it's case by case. Like if somebody is unable to work and unable to go to school and you've done your assessment, you may be put on antidepressants together with therapy. Like there's no one single solution for mental health. Like Jeff, you're unique, Letty is unique, my experiences are unique. I may be depressed because of school, things are not going how I want them to go. So now we'll talk about the school. You may be stressed because like what do you think will make you depressed? Stressed or any season.
Bei ya mafuta ikipanda tena. Vile bei ya mafuta inapanda. Ikipanda tena atatumaliza.
Yeah, the finances, you see, and you need to go to a therapist to check your spending, to check all those things, like, how do you view money. But even money can be a trauma response, how you view money, like if you even grew up in lack, this is the way maybe you look at money, all those things. Now it's case by case. So I would say, like, for the person who is going through a hard time and is depressed, I think seeking the help from the professions, going for a few sessions, and even the government tries, like we find in the level 5 hospitals, there are psychologists if money is an issue, also like Kenyatta Hospital, people who are below 24 years, the mental health clinic like attends to them, and you can find a therapist within your budget. And yes, me and Letty are also psychologists and we practice.
Yeah, and I think as we finish, we'd love if you guys could let us know where to reach you as you give us a very beautiful parting shots. We'd really love to know where to reach you, and probably one more thing or something else that you'd be wanting to tell our people before we part.
All right, maybe I can start. I think just to add on to the question on depression, this being the month where we're really looking at suicide, September is the month for suicide. Depression is one of the highly diagnosed disorders that primarily also has suicide in it. And so as the reviewer was asking the question about how bad depression can get, it can lead to suicide. And I saw one person who wrote it can even be considered like the final symptom of depression because you're so hopeless to the point where life has no meaning. So parting shot to that is that we'd rather hear you out than come to your funeral. I think that was the most amazing thing I had during this month of suicide. And even as we're talking about trauma, I know for most of us experiencing negative emotions is something that's very hidden. And now we're even having the term of high functioning, where people really mask what is truly going on just so that they can promote an appearance or a facade about themselves. But all our emotions are important, relevant, and they're inbuilt because they all serve a purpose. And if you're having difficulty admitting those emotions, feeling those emotions, experiencing those emotions, we are the trained professionals to help you live a holistic life because you are supposed to feel sad, you are supposed to fear. They all work towards helping you protect and survive and thrive as a human being, as an organism. So locking out any one of these things is very harmful to yourself, and we are here to teach people how to have healthier lives. That doesn't mean just happy all the time. It means knowing how and when to deal with everything that comes your way.
Thank you. And maybe you can let us know where can we reach you if probably someone would want to reach out to you, Letty.
Yes. So my Instagram is Miss Mtange, my LinkedIn is Letty Mtange, my Facebook is Letty Mtange, and you can also reach me on phone, but you can also reach me on social media, and I can give you my phone number and we can continue talking from there on. So those are all the places that I can be found.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Emma?
Okay, I think I would also encourage feeling all our emotions, because I feel like that is the core of the starting of issues. And you do not feel how you're feeling and you want to numb, so you use like a drug, you know. And when you begin feeling all your emotions, you'll be knowing your patterns. You know, this time I'm sad, this time this is the trigger for this, so you'll be able to understand yourself better. I would also say I would say feeling all your emotions and valuing to seek the help of a profession when things are not okay. I think it's very, very important. Yeah. And my social media handles, my Instagram is Muchoki Emma, and then also on LinkedIn I'm Emma Muchoki, and also my Google business, it's Emma Muchoki, clinical psychologist. Yeah.
Thank you so much, people. And if probably something has missed you and you'd like to ask more questions, feel free to reach us as Resident Experience in Tsavo. The number that is just down there, register for performances, Apo to Chidi. Your number, Piga. If you have any issues, if you need assistance with anything, kindly feel free to reach us. Also, you will find us tomorrow from 6:30 to 8:30 at the Coral Bells rooftop for our Be All Right open mic session. So what we want to do is, everyone who has a talent, everyone who is willing, everyone who is who wants to perform, everyone who would want to watch other people to perform, kindly join us, kindly come. We will send the registration link. Contact that number as well if you'd like to get the registration link. If you're too shy to register, feel free to just pop up. Kuja juu, kutakuwa na poets, kutakuwa na musicians, kutakuwa na snacks. Kama tu utaki anything else, kutakuwa tu na snacks. So feel free to come. As well, as we conclude, we are giving 2,000 shillings to every single person who invites, every single resident who invites a friend, a family member to come and be a Savorite. So you can also reach us on the number that was provided under. You can also reach us on the number that we have provided there, on our social media platforms. Wherever you see Savo, just reach us. Tutatu kupata. Yes, so thank you so much. Thank you so much people who joined later. Tunakuona, Sophie, Cynthia, the review. Thank you so much for your questions. We really enjoyed them. Kevin, Bilha, Nduta, both Ndutas, Victor, asanteni sana, and looking forward to see you soon. Thank you. Asanteni. Cheers. Now letting pale Wanyi Road, mmekuwa mkisema sababu tunapenda hii upande ya dunia sana, ikienda sana ile side ya Embakasi, but now we have come to Ngong Road, so we are letting at Savo Skywalk as of 1st September tulishaanza. Endeni muishi, nyumba ni amazing, nyumba ni I think should be one of the most affordable things you can find along Ngong Road, and guess what, it's amazing. So tupatane huko Skywalk, feel free, and also ukirefirm to, if you live in any other of our properties and you refer someone to Skywalk, our Kenya shillings 2,000 still applies. So karibuni sana, tupatane Skywalk.